Welcome, everyone, to the September board meeting for Ignite CDA, Coeur d'Alene's Urban Renewal Agency. And if you would all stand, we'll do the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And we have a new board member to welcome, Dan English. Welcome. Thanks for being here.
Yep.
And you get 30 seconds if you want to talk about yourself.
No, I do enough of that.
Thank you for being here.
Sure.
We look forward to it.
Glad to. Yeah.
And also, I'll need some board action to remove item 11, the executive session, off of the agenda, please. There's no need for one now.
Okay, so Mr.,
Motion?
Okay.
I was going to say, I move that we strike item 11 from today's board meeting agenda.
I'll second that.
Second it? Okay. All in favor?
excellent motion.
Aye.
Aye.
And opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Now it's time for public comment. Please come forward, state your name and address.
My name is David Lyons. I live in Midtown in Coeur d'Alene.
Thank you.
No agenda for this meeting was posted on the Ignite website due to what Mr. Burns calls technical issues. So virtually no one out there has any idea what's being discussed and decided here today. I happened to get the agenda yesterday because I emailed Mr. Burns. And I was stunned to see that Mr. Burns had included as item 7B his discussion of Midtown request for proposals on Ignite property. The term request for proposals begs a basic question. Proposals for what? An RFP must specify what it wants people to bid on. Could be a performing arts theater, office building, an auditorium, townhomes, condos, lots of things. The point is, answering that question pretty much determines what will be done on the property. It's 90% of the ballgame. So that begs a second basic question. Who gets to decide that? With a public agency funded by taxpayer dollars, the answer must be the members of the public most affected by the decision, who will have to live with the consequences every day. The people of Midtown. The people of Midtown must be directly and seriously involved in any RFP process from the start. And that means determining the parameters of any RFP. Mr. Burns, of course, did not tell anyone from Midtown that this would be on today's agenda or invite anyone to participate. In fact, since your agency bought out IHFA, no one from your agency, with the admirable exception of Mayor Widmeyer, has ever bothered to ask the people of Midtown what they'd like to see done there. And yet, you would sit there and presume to decide that? Or let Mr. Burns decide it? Some of you are new to this board. Don't make the same fundamental mistake Mr. Burns and the old crony board made 10 years ago when they got things completely backwards at the start. They decided first what they wanted to do there and with who. They fell in love with IHFA. Then they spent years trying to cram that down the neighborhood's throat, lying to the public, secretly colluding with IHFA, neighbors living in fear of what Mr. Burns would pull next. Don't repeat those mistakes. Meaningfully involve the neighborhood from the start. That would be serving the public, which is why you got on this board. So before any term or parameter of any RFP is decided, reach out to the people of Midtown. Listen to what they say. Take it seriously, not just go through the motions. And do your best to carry out what they want. Thank you.
I'd like to respond. Mr. Lyons,
Yes.
I find your statement in continually derogatorily mentioning Mr. Burns in your statement, I find that objectionable, and I will tell you why. Mr. Burns does not make decisions without the approval of the board. And if the board, and as I also recall earlier, we had discussed, and I don't remember, Tony, perhaps you can help remind me, that we did discuss that we were going to go out with an RFP for proposals. The proposals certainly have not been defined because there's opportunity potentially there in that area, and because some of the neighbors, a few of them actually don't live very close to the area, came in and created a number of objections, which we listened to and did change, but I find your continued repetition of derogatorily mentioning Mr. Burns objectionable.
Well, sometimes the truth hurts, Commissioner. I'm speaking from my personal experience with Mr. Burns over the last close to 3 years. And it's become clear to me that Mr. Burns has what we in the law call an irreconcilable conflict of interest in dealing with Midtown. He hates us so much he can't see straight. That completely disables him from acting dispassionately and professionally with respect to Midtown. And as long as you bring up the subject, I think it's appropriate that Mr. Burns be completely isolated from any involvement with Midtown because he cannot deal with us fairly and dispassionately. And every day that Mr. Burns is involved in day-to-day activities is an opportunity for him to skew and manipulate events to shaft us, which is what he's been doing for the last 3 years. So respectfully, I disagree, and I stand by everything I said and have ever said about Mr. Burns.
I find that objectionable.
So
I think
noted.
you are incorrect.
So noted.
Any other public comment? Moving right along. I'd like to have some board action on approving the August 16th board meeting minutes, please. We're going to do these one at a time.
I move to approve the August 16th, 2017 board meeting minutes.
I second.
And second, any corrections or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. The same thing for
To approve the August 29th, 2017 special call meeting minutes.
Second?
Moved and seconded. For approval of the August 29th special call board meetings. Any corrections or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Third but not last, September 12th, 2017 special call meeting minutes.
Second.
Moved and seconded for the special call meeting on September 12th. Any corrections or additions? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you very much. Next item on the agenda is the public hearing for the proposed sale of agency right-of-way property located east of Beebe Boulevard.
So do you want to open a public hearing?
And it's open to public hearing.
Okay, so I'll give a quick background on the issue, just to refresh everybody's memory of what we're talking about. Is that the agency owns the area in pink here, which is the old railroad right-of-way east of Beebe Boulevard. The yellow is Union Pacific property, and the blue is the BLM, Bureau of Land Management, City of Coeur d'Alene property. So this is the piece of property that is involved in the public hearing. And as you recall, the board agreed to enter into a potential sale for this property of $320,000 as happened at the August board meeting. And as part of the protocol, you have this public hearing today to seek any public input on that proposed surplus sale.
Seeing no public input on this,
Are you looking for a motion then to declare it
to
surplus?
declare it surplus.
Let's close the public hearing first.
Then we'll close the public hearing, seeing no objections or comments. And now I'll, entertain a motion to approve.
I would move to declare the property located east of BB Boulevard that is agency-owned as surplus property and seek a proposed sale of this property.
And that price would be the minimum of $320?
320, and what we would do is just go ahead and put out a public notice seeking sealed bids that would be due prior to the October 18th board meeting. And we will open those sealed bids at the October 18th board meeting.
Perfect.
Need a second for that.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any other comments, questions, concerns? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. It's good. It's good. Perfect. Financial report. Commissioner Arman.
Well, it's a little bit smaller report this month than in past months, but we'll move along here. So starting off with the Lake District balance sheet. The Lake District experienced a $71,309 decrease in cash assets from the month in July. There was no real significant issues for receivables. Other assets, the Lake District 2016 Series Note Reserve Account had $27 of earned interest on the account balance for the month of August. Liabilities and fund balance for the Lake District, mortgages and notes payable line item had a decrease of $5,988 for the August, represents a standard month of debt service. All other liability parameters were either unchanged or normal, including the 2% credit to the arch line item. The Lake District P&L, Lake District received $86,519 in tax increment revenue from the county in August. The agency-funded initiative Four Corners project had a $66,133, reflects the payment for the Memorial Park element of the project. Professional fees line item values include payments to Welsh Comer for $17,760 for the North Park Drive project, and Miller Stauffer for $51,750 for the parking facility project work. Repair and maintenance line item value shows $7,408 for the Midtown Green Space Initiative, and all other P&L expenditures were either normal for the month. Moving on to the River District, the balance sheet. Assets in the River District experienced $580,076 decrease in cash assets from July month end, primarily due to the Celtice Way payments. And the liabilities and fund balance were pretty much all normal for the month, including the 2% credit due to the yards line item. The River District P&L, the River District received $21,188 in tax increment revenue from the county in August. Agency-funded program line item reflects $572,240 payment made to the Celtice Way project in June. Professional fees line item includes a $12,150 paid to Welsh Comer for their work on the Atlas Mill Site initiative. All other P&L expenditure line items were normal for the month. That is the financial report for the month of August.
Thank you, sir.
Now on to payables.
Nick, I just had a quick question for Tony. Tony, on the agency-funded programs for the River District, is the total there, the $1,289,000, is that all Celtice? Or is that the only agency-funded program that we,
In the River District?
in the River District? That's, okay. Thank
So looking at the payables for the month of August, starting out with some legal fees. Elam and Burke had a cost of $4,867.10. This was the legal fees for the Atlas Simpson Mill Site Initiative. Holly Troxel had three different payments, $1,855 for the legal fees for the legislative issues and legal counsel and public records. $2,533 for the Park Drive Initiative, the railroad right-of-way surplus sale, and then $3,627 for the potential district expansion and planning for the River District. All total for Holly Troxel was $8,015 for the month of August. City of Coeur d'Alene Arts Commission, we made our payments there. For the River District, the payment to the Arts Commission was $26,257, and the Lake District payment to the Arts Commission was $86,770, for a total payment to the Arts Commission from the two districts of $113,027. We made our normal membership fee payment to Jobs Plus for this. It comes up once a year, and this year was for $5,000 for the 2017 membership fee. The Midtown Initiatives, we had two payments there, one for $2,493, which was to Inland Fence for the installation of a blockchain link fence with two gates in Midtown, and then for $6,461.30 for the two-way seal coating and striping of the Midtown surface parking lots. We also had our annual payment to ICRIMP for insurance, $2,725.49. We paid the City of Coeur d'Alene for the broadcasting of the Ignite Coeur d'Alene board meetings on a monthly basis for fiscal year 2017 was $1,200. Next payment was for Cushland and Associates for the Atlas Mill Site Initiative Review, $4,609.10. The Atlas Mill Site Initiative was the next payment to Welsh Comer for $2,278.75. We have a total budget of $25,000, so there's about $11,850 yet remaining. So to date, we've spent $12,150. Now comes the big ones. Salties Wade Roadway Revitalization Project, Welsh Comer Engineers, $59,200, and the contractor T. Riviere, $685,306.58. Total spent on the Salties Way in the month of August was $744,506.58. To date, we've spent $1,011,822, with the remaining $3,311,378.36 yet to be spent on if we stay at that total budget. Next payment was the Downtown Parking Structure Project, Miller Stauffer Design Team, $69,508.19 was the total for the downtown parking structure for August. And then last but not least, the Four Corner Project, the Memorial Park element, Welsh Comer Construction, $7,500 for that project. All total, all those payments come to $972,191.51. So that is the payables for the month of August.
Thank you, sir.
I do have a question. I know I've asked this before, but I wanted to remind myself, the payments to the Arts Commission, is that based on a percentage of?
Percent of our revenues for the
Okay.
year.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
Well, I had one related to that, how, and maybe he said, but how often do those size of payments come in? Is that an annual?
To the Arts Commission?
Yeah.
Yeah, once a year. We always do it in September, at the end of the fiscal year, because we accrue it over the fiscal
Okay.
year.
Okay. And is that kind of a typical size?
Well, it just depends on our revenue level. It's
Yeah.
in the ballpark, yeah. Some years a little higher than others, depending on our increment.
Okay.
No other questions?
Move to approve the payables for August 2017
And the financials?
And the financials?
and the financials.
Okay,
Second?
seconded. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Next on the item is the audit firm's proposals. We actually sent an RFP out for proposals for doing the 2017 audit. We actually got 4 proposals back. I think everybody's seen those, but the 4 proposals were for Ide Bailey was $12,000, Magnus McHugh was $10,000, Ben Johnson Accounting was $9,300, and Scott Hoover Accounting was $8,000. So those were the 4 proposals that we got back for audits for the 2017 fiscal year. We discussed it a bit in finance and felt that all of them would be very, very good firms to work with, but, there's quite a difference between Scott Hoover's $8,000 bid and Ben Johnson's $9,300. So I would make a recommendation, we go with Scott Hoover at $8,000.
I would agree with
Board
that.
action?
Scott is a good young guy. I think he's a former Magnuson
Yes.
McHugh.
Yep.
Tony, did Scott, when he was working with Magnuson, work on our
He
audit?
did.
Do you remember?
He did it kind of in the second chair position.
We've got a little history with this.
I can also speak to the fact that I've worked extensively with Magnus and McHugh, Ide Bailey, and both Scott Hoover and Ben Johnston were auditors on the college's audits for a number of years, and I feel that of any of the firms have the qualifications, the skills, the ability, the knowledge, and the professionalism to conduct the audit, so it really is up to the board. I see no difference in ability or knowledge to be able to perform the audit, so it's really up to the wishes of everyone to.
Good information, thank you.
You're welcome.
So Mick, was your motion to,
I would make a motion that we accept the bid from Scott Hoover Accounting for $8,000 fee for the 2017 audit.
and I second that.
Moved and seconded. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Motion carries.
That completes my report.
Thanks, Finance Commissioner. Parking Commissioner, Mr. Jordan, your monthly report.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, I don't have anything really to update on the City Parking Commission. On the parking team for the parking structure, I have some updates. They submitted the plans to the building department for building permits, so they're going through the city departments right now. I've got one question for Tony. Have they started the demo yet? I was thinking that was starting the 1st of October.
They went through and removed loose materials from inside the
Okay.
buildings. They've done asbestos testing, and they found asbestos only in the building on 4th Street, and they estimate it's going to be $1,300 to remediate that. So they'll get that taken care of this week. They're going to start taking the 2 trees down in the alley this week. But well, I'll let you finish your report, and you can see the timing here.
Thanks for the update. So the big time demolition starts after the 1st of October, and everyone was given notice that's in the city parking lot there, and they've worked with them to shuffle them around other lots. So they'll be staging and getting ready for the big time demolition right after the 1st of October, correct? And let me see here. So the bid packages are being advertised in the paper, I guess today, September 20th. And then they're being sent out to the plan shops in Coeur d'Alene and Spokane. And then we had some discussion about doing a 2-tiered construction schedule. There's some concern with the engineers and architects about the climate right now and how busy all the contractors are. And this is starting in the fall and going through the winter, so there's some concern about that. So we have a 2-tier construction schedule here. So we're looking at October 9th being the bid opening date, October 18th, the review and awards. And then we're looking at a 240-day schedule, which would be 8 months. And that's the original schedule we were looking at. And then we elected to go ahead and offer a longer schedule, a 10-month schedule, 300 days, and that would end July 31st. And we're going to let it get bid both ways to see if we can save some money, giving them some more time, so that they have some, the spring and part of the summer to work in and have not such a tight timeline through the winter months based on the kind of what we see out there. So that's the direction that we're going right now.
Mr. Chairman, I would just say that that's a very good plan to have that as 2-tiered. I think we're going to see that July 31st number probably be considerably lower. And it's something that we can live through. I mean, where it's going to be a great addition to downtown if it comes through a couple months after the fact or 3 months after the fact. And it does save a substantial amount of money. I think that's a very wise move on your part to put it out that way.
So a contractor wanting to bid on this will have to issue 2 bids if they want to
Yeah.
On the
entertain
bid, on
either
the
one.
bid form, there's an alternative on the timing that they'll have a separate bid on. And just to clarify, the 240 days and the 300 days will start on when they receive the notice to proceed. So that's when the clock starts on those. So it might go a little longer than July 31st, depending on when they actually get the notice to proceed.
So if bid award is on the 18th, then when is the notice to proceed?
Well, it's kind of when they're ready and when they get the building permit. They're working through the building permit process now. They're getting city department feedback, and they kind of have to get all that taken care of, and hopefully we'll have the building permit in a very timely fashion to not impede the start of the project.
Mr. Chairman, we'll be down, Tony, how many spots were there? How many surface spots? 70-some, 60-some spaces? With
I
the
can't
surface?
recall off the top of my head. In the surface lot?
Yeah, so that's the number we would be down if we had to be down through part of the summer. I mean, I think that we can pick up the balance in some of the private lots around there, as well as we have the new county parking lot going to be open, so for special events, it can spill out over into that parking, so I do think that given that extended time again is a good move.
We hope it will. Nobody has a crystal ball, but we're hoping it will,
But
so.
you did. You told me
No.
you did.
If he doesn't.
No, sorry.
Oh.
So hopefully it makes a difference. You know, if we have to wait a little longer, but we can afford it, then it's worth it.
Whatever it takes to get the best bid. I think that's a good idea.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. So that sounded like a good idea when they presented it to us. So that concludes my report, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Jordan. Next on the agenda is the Executive Director's report.
Couple items here, Mr. Chairman. The first one is engineering services, a request for qualifications. I'd like to propose that the board consider soliciting proposals for qualified engineers and engineering firms to create a list of up to 3 persons or firms selected and pre-approved consideration by the agency for assistance in project work, that consists of, site development, grading, remediation, water, sewer, roadway construction, park design, bank stabilization, a lot of these issues that we're going through right now, like with the proposed acquisition of the Atlas Mill site. So, these professional services would likely to include participation in public meetings, surveying, schematic design, cost estimation, grant applications, construction documents, et cetera. So if you agree with this proposal, the agency will create a list of up to 3 of the most qualified persons or firms, and will utilize those persons or firms to negotiate a contract, a detailed scope of work, fee schedule, et cetera, with a preferred person or firm on a per-project basis. So hopefully we would get quite a few SOQs, solicitation or submittal of qualifications, and then we would rank the top 3, and then we would work with the number 1 on projects, and if we can't come to agreement with number 1, we would go to number 2 and go to number 3. So that would be the process for the board to go through, so that we could, be very, tactical on these projects as they come along.
I would just add that there's a specific statutory provision that allows for this kind of creation of a list of up to 3 and have engineer, architectural kind of services be pre-qualified, and it's specifically geared, I believe, towards, smaller entities like this entity where you don't have an engineer on staff, right? So like the city has an engineer who functions kind of in the capacity that we're looking for someone to function in, but we have to contract with them and without having to go through an RFQ every single time we have one of these small projects. This is a way to pre-qualify them, and then you can hire. You don't necessarily have to work with the first one either. If the second one is better suited for a certain project, you could go directly to them. You can hire anybody on that 1 through 3 list for the types of projects that are enumerated herein.
And they're,
Sorry, and I've had experience with doing proposed RFQs for multiple years, and create a contract for multiple years or a year at a time with someone who's providing those external services. Is part of the reason for doing it as an SOQ so that we have the flexibility of skill sets that may be different, or can you tell me the reasoning of why not to do an RFQ and just hire someone on an annual basis rather than a project basis?
I don't know if we can hire, are you saying why don't we hire somebody on an annual basis?
Well, no, instead of creating a list of 3 to do an RFQ process to commit with a firm to do services for all your projects for a specific period of time, whether it be a year or longer, and then you have that commitment from that person based on that process rather than doing a list of 3.
This particular statutory provision provides that you would select a list of 3.
Does it? Okay. If it's statutory, I can't argue with that.
Tony, can we also do this for architects too? Would that work?
I don't know, can we?
I believe they do fit within
Professional services?
that statute.
Is there a dollar limit? No? Okay.
Deanna? Deanna?
I like the idea of the three because it might give us an opportunity in the future if someone's really busy to move to someone else. So I think it makes some sense to have, we've got many qualified engineering firms in our community. I think this gives us more of a chance to spread the wealth, so to speak,
Absolutely.
and also gives us the opportunity to make those choices.
And how are they chosen, 1, 2, and 3? Isn't there a scorecard that we?
Yeah, that's in the document I sent around, that two-pager, just kind of showing you how they were scored.
That we
And
all
I-
have to fill out then?
And I would look to maybe, look for some volunteers off the board, maybe have a little ad hoc committee that would help with the screening of these and kind of bring them back to the board for approval. Would anybody be willing to serve on that ad hoc?
I'll do it. Newbie volunteers.
We need a couple volunteers, right?
Just couple, three, yeah.
I got time.
Jim? Got 2.
I think Olivia.
Olivia should
Would
be
you-
on it.
Ooh, she's not here. She would love to do it.
I know she'd like to do it.
That happens when you miss.
bet.
I'm sure she appreciates that. Okay, that'll work.
It'll be a learning moment for me.
No, that's good.
So I would look for a motion to go ahead, authorizing me to issue the engineering services RFQ as proposed, and then we'll kind of get that process going.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded to put out a request for qualifications. Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And any opposed?
Tony, I would like to possibly explore the idea of looking at architects also. I mean, it seems like we run into architectural design situations a lot, and we kind of have one or two, firms we kind of use for fallback all the time. This would obviously give us that opportunity to have a list of 3 firms that we could use, and just depending on design and structure and so on and so forth, we might not use the same one as much as we do now.
So do you want to do that separately, or in kind of parallel with this effort, or wait a little while, or?
It's up to the board, makes no difference to me. I mean, if it's possible to do with architects, I think it might give us some insight on other firms that might have an interest in working with us.
Do we need to run the traps on that at all, or do you?
I would say, let's look at the statute and make sure, let me double check the statute, and then we could bring back something similar to what we brought this month.
Architects.
Specifically for
because there is some
architects and this
specific-
is for engineering.
Right.
Good idea.
We have to define what the project scopes are with some specificity.
Sure.
I mean, not like individual projects, but what types of services we want them
Right.
to provide, so.
Okay. Okay. Motion carries.
Second item I have is to kind of discuss a draft request for proposals for the Midtown property that I prepared for a conversation discussion. And see if I can bring this up here. So, just to refresh everybody's memory of our Midtown ownership. Our Midtown ownership is highlighted in red and blue. The parcels being proposed for the RFP include the Bearland lots, which are now green, and the Paris Flea Market building, which is 823 4th Street. The parking lots are not included in this RFP. They would remain public parking lots, surface lots for Midtown. The Idaho Housing and Finance Authority, the housing company project property is not involved in this RFQ, or RFP. So that kind of gives everybody kind of the lay of the land. As you recall, the board asked me to prepare this RFP this past summer, kind of as we were putting the green space in. They were interested in maybe continuing the process of bringing an RFP together, so I proposed this draft. And the main thing I need from the board is some input on what type of project that you would like to see up here in Midtown. I mean, I shared with you the Midtown overlay, kind of one pager off the city website, kind of give you an idea what the city looks for in the Midtown overlay. They want an active, energized project, mixed use. They'd like to see something active on the street level. that could be combined with residential or office. That is kind of what they envision the overlay to look like. The height, there's a height maximum in Midtown of 45 feet, so the structure could not be higher than 45 feet, but that would be, that's what they envisioned for the Midtown overlay when the city put this together. So I just wanted to get a sense from the board, how broad of basically a catcher's mitt you want to put on for this endeavor. Do you kind of want to leave it wide open? Do you want to kind of, initially start with a conversation of narrowing it down project-wise? Just want to kind of get some input, and also timing. When do we want to move forward with this? Do we want to wait till after the first of the year? Do we want to get after it pretty quick? And kind of who's involved in the process?
Deanna?
I like the idea of leaving options for people who may see things there, so I think it would be, wise to kind of leave it open-ended. The other thing is, I'd like to get started, and we've only got, 3 years left of our district, at which point in time, that property will revert to the city. And the city has a different process than we do to move forward with any kind of development. So I think that the sooner we get started on it, the better. And there's opportunity right now, I think, in the community for people who are looking for projects, potential projects. And of course, our goal has always been for Midtown to have whatever happens there generate activity and energy into the Midtown area. And I think that might be something we might want to be sure is as part of the, I read it, but I can't remember what all I read.
Yeah, vibrancy.
Part of the description is that we do want to see that it's a value to the Midtown community, anything that happens to come in there. So I don't think that would hurt to put that in the request for proposals. But other than that, my opinion is let's get rolling, let's get started.
Have we received public comments on ideas for that development in the
We're not-
past?
We wouldn't be the developer,
Just
that would be the
ideas, what
developer.
the ideas would come in from the public? I mean, possible uses for the land.
It would come in for people that wanted a project on that.
Got it, so they would decide. We wouldn't have any say in what is developed there.
Well, yeah, you would. I mean, what you do, you would solicit all kinds of, what I'm hearing, you solicit all kinds of ideas, and then you would probably get a bunch of overtures, hopefully quite a few proposals that you would then work to kind of choose the one that you think would be the most valuable in Midtown.
Thanks.
And then the process is, for some of the new board members, is that we would work with the developer that you choose on the project you choose, and we would enter into a DDA with them, which is a disposition and development agreement, wherein we would transfer the ownership of the land to them at a fair reuse appraised price. So that is kind of could be part of our equity into the project. We really like your project, developer X, and in order to help you out, we have an appraiser come in and say, Ignite board, if you want this project built, the developer needs to get the dirt for X amount of money. It could be from 0 to fair market value, and the appraiser will help determine that.
Tony, what is this zoned?
This is zoned, well, it's in the Midtown overlay, so it has kind of its own infill zoning. So there's a lot of increased density that can go, but it is limited by 45 feet. So
But as far as options, it's pretty open.
I think it's C-17 full commercial with a
with the overlay.
infill overlay over it.
Right, that's what I was figuring it
Which
probably was. but-
gives it some advantages and puts some limitations on it.
Okay.
Steve?
Mr. Chairman, what I was wondering, is it possible, and Danielle may be able to give us some direction on that, can you run something with the Idaho finance folks? Because that's going to be probably a critical piece to the whole thing. I know that that they own that. Whoever came in there would have to buy them out of that, but is there a way to participate with them on the whole area?
I called Gerald Hunter and chatted with him about this opportunity, and he chose that they would not be interested to be a partner in this RFQ process with the agency, but they would be willing to entertain any overtures from a potential developer that wanted to make a bigger project. But it would be a separate deal with them and not with us, not a combined overture.
Could we have some language in that request for proposal to say that this is an option? It's owned by a second party, but if someone wanted to include that in their proposal, that their they're open to
We
that.
did put it in there. If
is
they're
in
willing
here.
to entertain.
What you're saying, if I would have read the whole thing, I wouldn't have asked that question, is what you're trying to tell
No,
me.
but, maybe we can make it more clear, but it is in there.
I think we need to make it more clear, because it is kind of vague about exactly who we're, I mean, it says who we're dealing with, but, or they would be dealing with, but I think it makes it more clear.
Well,
Go ahead. The other thing, Tony, the parking lot that's just to the north of the property there, would that be able to be included also? I think what you're looking at here is, you know, the footprint of the 823 4th Street and the Bear land parcels is relatively large.
Right.
But I mean, if you add on the housing property, that's a better footprint. But the parking lot also gives you a nicer footprint for really developing.
Well, that would be a board decision, if you want to kind of include that in and, you know, kind of add to the size of it. You know, the opportunity cost is that you would lose, potentially some surface parking in Midtown, but that is a choice that the agency can decide on.
Once again, I guess I'll go back to the way the zoning and the overlay reads. Whatever development would have to have their own parking, though, is that correct?
They'd have to meet the overlay parking requirements.
Requirements.
Right.
So there's going to be parking there from the development.
Unless they say that they would use some of our existing surface parking lot to meet that requirement.
I understand what
I
you're
just
saying.
don't know how they're going to.
I guess I'm looking at it saying, if you expanded the footprint, that allows parking, allows a bigger footprint for construction, and the parking would be cool with the development.
If they choose to make it parking, yeah.
Well, they're going to have parking to meet the standards.
Yeah, they will.
I think parking is very important in that area, and that parking lot, as I recall, and Tony, perhaps you can refresh my memory, but weren't there some agreements with the youth ranch when we put that together? That there would be some parking
There is some.
available for their,
I don't know if there's a count, I'd have to look back at that if we were to thinking about including that, but there was some arrangement that the youth ranch would have access to that parking. But
So
I'm
what
not sure
about
if
the
it could be
parking to
all
the
Third
west?
Street. Pardon?
There's parking to the west also.
Right, I mean, I'd have to look at the document, see if we could use that Third Street parking lot to satisfy that condition.
Mr. Chairman, I guess what I would envision this being is, that say we put that, and I agree with Deanna, let's make this as broad as possible. There's a lot of talented, creative developers out there. Let them bring us their ideas. I wouldn't want to limit ideas, but give them general ideas, but not narrow the scope. But I would see this process being is so we get 8 requests for proposals on that piece of property, that we would have a special public open house for all of the participating neighbors that want to come through. They can view all of the proposals, give us their feedback, and at that time, you know, we can hear from the neighbors. So right now, we're asking, okay, development community, bring us what your ideas are. Once we have those, then we can bring the neighbors in, and we have a ranking process. We can have they like this or they don't like that. I think that would be a time for a special meeting to, when we get all the proposals in. We may not get any proposals, but however many we get, that would be a time to bring in and have a special meeting to bring folks in.
And I think we've done that process in the past, too, and there was actually a voting scheme and stuff to the head,
Yeah.
so that's a great idea.
Well, I like the idea of wide open, I mean, kind of a blank slate. And, you know, having grown up here and around Midtown and all of that, one thing I think, you know, have to balance is that, you know, the neighborhood has a particular interest, but, you know, I live out in Coeur d'Alene Place, and I have an interest because it's part of my town, and actually I, you know, go to the barber shop there all the time, and I really like the new green lawn there. By the way, whoever is responsible, but, you know, this is a whole community impact and improvement, and so I think, you know, start as wide open and creative, but then also, you know, like the mayor says, we want to make sure there's a public input component for, you know, near and far public, so to speak, but anyway, yeah, just not have a lot of boundaries around it to begin with, so.
Brad?
I was going to say, a few months ago, this didn't just come out of nowhere. There has been discussion on this, and I brought it up several months ago about letting the entrepreneurs and the the talent of the community come forward and see what they want to present here. And I think the mayor's correct. There needs to be public input on it, so it probably makes sense after we get the proposals, and then right now, we don't even know what to have input on, but they could look at the proposals and see what the neighborhood would buy into. And in the early 2000s, we did some RFPs there, and nobody could ever quite make anything pencil. There was some mixed-use proposals in there and so forth, and as I recall, Tony, I think you were here then, I think they submitted their proposals, and we even let them have some time at the podium to make a presentation on their proposals. So I don't know how we structure this, but I think that's what we did back in the early 2000s, and nobody could make anything pencil, and they backed off of it. We had a couple of things going, and I think one was an art gallery with some apartments above it, and I forget what all. But then the deal came with Idaho Housing to do the market rate condos, which of course we know what that turned into. So, but I think this isn't a bad time to do it. Winter's coming, but the market's really good around here right now, and things are turning around. So this is the time somebody would be looking at this and, sharpening their pencil and putting their heads together on a project. Then they could plan it and engineer it and get it drawn and permitted through the winter, if they won and we had a proposal that worked for everybody, and then they could be ready to go in the spring when the weather broke. So this isn't a bad time to do something like this. And as the mayor said, it needs to have neighborhood input, so we just figured out how to structure that and how we'd structure them presenting their proposals. We should be so lucky to get eight RFPs. Hopefully we get that, yeah.
And then I think it's important to note that we're not bound, if we don't get any of them that meet what the board would like to go forward with, we're not bound to go with any of those. So we could reject them all.
That's correct. If nobody liked anything, we could. I think one time we had 3 proposals and we went with one of them, and then they couldn't make it pencil, and then we did it a second time, but so we'll just see what they come up with.
I know one of the other comments you had was looking at target dates and timelines, and I think one of the things I'd recommend is what Brad just said. Things are going really good right now, and we don't know how long that's going to last. So I would say time is of the essence, and let's move quickly on this. Let's try to get this out as rapid as possible. Let's get the developers or whoever active on this, and let's see what creative juices are flowing out there.
Perfect.
Tony, would you like a motion to proceed?
Yes, give me direction on how you'd like me to go.
I would like to make a motion to proceed with requesting for proposal on property owned in Midtown, developing some type of language that is as broad as possible, and start on it as soon as we can get it out.
I would second that motion.
So what I'll do is go ahead and clean up this RFP, work with Danielle to make sure take your input in, and we'll go ahead and release the RFP with certain dates, and then once we receive them, we'll structure another venue to kind of have you review them, and then set up any type of further stakeholder review as they come along.
Sounds great.
Can we have the RFP include the language about that you'll need to make a public presentation at the end of everybody issuing an RFP, and be prepared to do a public comment or a public meeting on it? And so then they know up front that they're going to also have to do that? Because if I was a shy, developer, maybe I don't want to do that.
Are there shy
Such a
developers?
thing as a shy developer.
Somewhere.
I don't know if they have to do that, but I just remember in the pre-recession days, in the earlier 2000s when we did this, I remember them submitting their proposals. And I don't know if we have any paperwork left in the archives about how those submittals were done, Tony, but they submitted their proposals, and I remember them standing at the podium, and they had some PowerPoint, and we're talking about the high points of their project. And so there's a lot of ways we could structure this, but that's kind of how it went the first time around. It seemed to work pretty good. And I think, like I said, we had 3 one time, and I forget, maybe a couple the other time. And we just went ahead and made a decision on what to pick.
I think you give them the option of doing it. I participated in an RFP in Idaho Falls where you could do a presentation there, And so I'm really experienced because we came in third out of 3. But we didn't give a presentation. We gave a written, but no oral presentation. We didn't go down there and present to the board. But there was the option. The developer could, or if they chose not to, they didn't have to.
I was just
That's
going
the
to
way to
say
do
that,
it.
But if we want, go ahead, Dan.
hard to imagine that somebody wouldn't jump at the chance if they had a chance for a verbal, but I
Right.
guess that tells me what.
I would suggest that we don't leave it up to the developer to decide whether or not they want to make the presentation, but we leave that up to the board. Once we see what's provided, then we can determine how we want to process the information that we receive. At that point, we could do an open house, we could ask them to come and make presentations. We have multiple options once we see what we have. If we get 8 people and they all want to make presentations, that could be a really long process, if we give them the option. But if we got 8 and narrowed it down through feedback to 3, then we could potentially do 3 presentations instead of 8. But I think part of that depends on how many responses we get and how we work through the process to evaluate.
A suggestion might be to have them prepare something that would work well in a public input kind of a process, maybe like some sort of large-scale schematics, or gear their presentation towards a public review and input
Open
process.
house.
Open house, rather than,
Prepared to display at an open house.
because the public's not going to want to come in and listen to 8 developers.
No.
They're going to want to walk around and look at what the projects are going to look at and have the opportunity to ask questions. Individual, maybe they come attend the public process and they have a presentation that's viewable by the public.
That's what I'm in.
Tony, I would also like to, somewhere in the document, talk about the land, both the north and south of the project space we're talking about, the parking lot to the north and the IHA property to the south. I think if a developer knows they have the potential for that big of a footprint, with the idea that parking is going to be required, I think we might be able to have best of both worlds, still have parking, but yet have a bigger footprint for the developer.
Leave them in there as options.
So you're saying include the 4th Street parking lot
Yes,
in the
as an option.
footprint
As an
As an
option.
option.
as an option?
And then there could be an option for the
IHA property also.
option to the south.
We'll have to
If we
run,
can.
we'll have to run the traps on the
Okay.
youth ranch to see what
Yeah,
our
see that.
latitude is.
See what the restrictions are there. But I think the more flexibility as far as size goes too, I think the better opportunities we might see.
I think
Yeah.
any developer is going to want as much ground to build his project on as he can and not bother with parking. If he thinks he can use our midtown parking for the development, that's what they're going to start looking at. I think it's important that we retain the integrity of those those parking lots. I really do. So I hate to see them as part of the RFP process. I really do. I think those are very important for the future. If you don't have parking, you don't have footprints on the sidewalk, your business doesn't do well. And we took out a lot of parking in Midtown when we just made one side of it parking only. So I think parking is very important, and I hate to have that in the RFP, just simply because any developer looking at it is going to say, I got all this ground, and maybe I can get all this parking too. Oh, wait a minute. No, that is important to the merchants of Midtown, that parking. And I think we need to recognize that. And I really object to doing that. I think that the footprint is here. There's overlay, there's requirements that the city has laid on for parking. I think that's important to stay there. But I don't want to give the impression that public parking is available for development.
So the public parking could be used though for the requirements.
Well, if they came, I don't think it can. I don't think it should, but, somebody may have a project, and as I recall, the IH, the housing was hoping to use some of that parking too, but if you look up there, some of that parking lot isn't really ours. And so that's been fenced off now, so that's limited that parking even more on the 3rd Street side. So I just think it's very important to say, here's your footprint. what can you build in this footprint, not, here's your footprint, oh, by the way, we've got all this extra parking that you might be able to acquire. So I would really hate to see that I think that public parking is very important to Midtown.
I was opposed to taking the parking off the one side of the street, and I still stand by that, rightly or wrongly. But we got these lots, so we had communal parking for the Midtown neighborhood, and I think I share Deanna's concerns. I'm not so opposed to letting the developer use some of the parking. It's kind of like we're talking about with a new structure on Coeur d'Alene. There's a lot of excitement going on in that part of the downtown there because there's some potential where people can do projects and get part of that parking garage to meet the parking requirements. So I guess I'd be open and seeing what they need, you know. And I kind of see what you're saying, and I share Deanna's concerns, you know, about just giving the parking lot away, but I'd be open to working with a developer on part of that parking lot. And I don't know how we exactly structure this RFP. You know, the people that did the original ones, they came up and made a presentation and did some PowerPoint, like I said earlier. The one nice thing about it, you know, it kind of seemed like a little bit, we've seen some of this when somebody comes in and they're trying to get, what I say, we do a share of the increment, and what do you call that? The OPA, yeah, I'm sorry, I had a middle cramp. When someone comes in with these apartment projects or a hotel or something, and they're asking for an OPA, and so they'll stand up and they'll do a presentation, and then we can ask questions. And so I think in an open house, where you don't have some kind of structure where you can ask questions so that we can, you know, really compare these and so forth, I'm not saying we shouldn't do an open house, but I think there needs to be a way that, you know, we can have the applicant have a controlled meeting, like a public hearing, where we can ask questions so we can rate these a little bit better, rather than just having a proposal in an open house, much like an OPA. Because the ones we did earlier, they were a lot like when a property owner comes in with an OPA. It felt a lot the same way, except we just had several people up there pitching their projects, and then we'd ask questions and decided on which one. I'm not against an open house, but I think we need to have a way to kind of grill the developers with their proposals here and ferret out any questions we have.
I don't know that has to be in the request for proposals if we.
Oh, I don't think it has to be. I'm just talking about.
I don't think it needs to be part of the.
I think it's important that we have a way to some kind of a formal way to interview them, kind of like when someone has an OPA proposal here, and
Well, I don't see
you could
us-
still do an
yeah,
open
I don't see us
house.
not doing that,
Mhm.
and then an open house.
That's fine. That's all I'm saying. It seemed like we're trying to decide which way to go, and I think maybe both have merits, and who knows, we might get 8 or 10, we might get 2. I guess that'll probably determine
Ben?
partly what
Well,
we do.
my 2 cents on that parking lot is I would really also support keeping it as a public parking lot. I think that's, very hard to come by, and for people who come to Midtown and are maybe going to go to a couple of 3 places there, the difference between being able to just swing into that lot, and then you go to 2 or 3 places and it's out there in the open and in and out, good access, versus if there was something that was, there's a difference that if it's going to be part of their development, are they going to charge different or whatever? But I also like the idea that maybe depending on the amount of spaces and all of that, maybe they could, in a sense, whatever you do, kind of lease a little portion of it for their needs, because all of the businesses, I think, get the advantage of having that lot. So, but in general, I agree with, kind of keeping that lot intact.
Clear as mud for you?
Pretty much. So, you guys are ready to just direct me on, is the lot in or out? So
Let's leave it out.
leave it out.
A developer knows that parking lot's there that's interested in this, and then if there's rules of being able to use public parking for yours, so then they will know all those anyways.
Creative.
I think working with the planning department, they'll figure that out.
Mr. Chairman, just to add a little bit on the parking, is that I think that Midtown is probably close to maybe having some challenges up there for parking. If you drive by, I mean, Angelo's has a sign that says Angelo's parking only, and had some new places open there. You know, T.W. Fisher opened up a place. We have the Bluebird that's very popular. There's supposed to be a coffee shop there, so there's increased traffic in there. The one thing that people sometimes do not count is employees. So let's say at a night where Capone's is on a Friday or Saturday night, they're going to have a dozen or more employees working the place. So there's a dozen car parks that aren't just for customers, just for the people that are working there. So I think that when moving forward with this RFP, we need to be very aware of parking, and if there's going to be businesses there, where are their employees going to park, and where the customers are going to park. And one of my all-time pet peeves is when you have employees park right in front of your own front door, because those are, but you'll see it up there in Midtown
Oh, yeah.
a lot. And I know that the antique shop on the corner there that's owned by the Idaho Housing, that is used a lot as an employee parking lot. And so I think Deanna's right, we need to provide public parking there, and we need to look at the overall parking picture when we're looking at this RFP.
I think you're totally right. And see, I see that parking lot on Third Street. It's a little off the beaten path for some of the customer parking, and it doesn't get utilized very much yet, but that could sure be a spot where somebody there, whether it's the RFP or some of the other employers there, could be leasing spots for their employees, and they could walk a few hundred feet from that Third Street parking lot, go to work. So I agree with you, it's important to keep those.
Additional input for you, or are you good?
I'm good to go.
You,
So
Kurt?
we'll get this out, and then we'll set a date, and we'll get the proposals coming in.
Did we vote on that?
We did
Yeah,
not.
we did.
Oh, we did vote?
I-
We had
Motion by Whitmire, seconded by Arman. Did we-
okay.
I don't think we voted.
We
I don't
never
know if you
voted.
said aye or not.
Okay.
No, I think we already voted, and we were discussing it afterwards.
We haven't, we discussed, we have not voted.
We were asking Tony if he could read our minds, and we never voted.
Okay, so a motion.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Again.
The
Good.
third item I have, Mr. Chairman, just an update on the North Park Drive and Tilford Lane subdivision initiatives, and I know the mayor wants to say something here also, but just to give the board an update, as you might know, is that the city plans to hold two public hearings at their October 3rd city council meeting for the proposed land changes on land exchanges for North Park Drive and Tilford Lane. So we'll get clear appreciation for council's direction at the October 3rd meeting. But I think the mayor would like to chat about the North Park Drive.
More updates?
So as we probably know, that one of the lots that the city owned and was part of the land exchange with Ignite had a restriction on it. And this restriction went all the way back to 1923, where the city was supposed to put a tennis court on that piece of property.
And I have a graphic up here for everybody.
And so no one felt comfortable going forward with that trade until we could get that restriction released. Randy Adams in our legal department did a great job of tracking down the heirs of the Curl family. The Curls were the ones that had donated to the city and put the restriction of a tennis court on that piece of property. And he tracked down 6 of the heirs in California. And we've been going back and forth on some discussions of releasing that restriction on the lot. It came down to where there was a spokesperson for the family, a lady by the name of Margaret Gates, who I was communicating back and forth with. They felt pretty strongly, their question was, why didn't the city ever build tennis courts on there? So this was 1923, so I asked Ron Edinger. Ron didn't remember, but it never happened. So they were really, they really wanted to remember their grandparents in some way. And so we went back and forth, and Margaret Gates, she agreed to personally make a $25,000 donation to the North Idaho Home Museum. And she expected, if they were going to sign the documents to release that, they would like to see a greater donation made to the North Idaho Museum. So we, going back and forth, then agreed throughout the offer that if the city, through its urban renewal agency Ignite, would make a $50,000 donation to the North Idaho Museum in payments of 4 installments of $12,500 a year. So we had 4 payments that we'd make over the next 4 years, if that was agreeable to their family. We would, legal would go through all the documents. It would be so noted, the donation, when it was going to North Idaho Museum, that it was coming from the Curl family, and they were agreeable to that. So I bring this to the board that if we were able to make that commitment of $50,000 payable of over 4 years to the North Idaho Museum, that the Curl family would sign the documents to release that restriction on there, which would then we'd be able to make that land trade. Then that land that Ignite would own after the trade would be free of any restrictions, and we could proceed ahead with the development of the 10-lot subdivision that we have proposed now. So that's where we currently are. I think that in going through the numbers, that is still fits into the financial model that Tony has been working on, and I think that that would be a good gesture. The money's going to stay with North Idaho Museum, which is a good thing, and I think that it would probably be the right way to go. So that's where we sit, and obviously that needs board action and board approval if that's the direction the board wishes to go.
And just to refresh the board's memory on the pro forma, and for the new board members, if we had those additional 2 lots, it would be in the neighborhood of another $350,000 of value to the initiative. So as the mayor proposed, if we were to give $50,000, we would still be on the positive side of this transaction.
Is there naming
I thought
rights?
those lots were worth more than 50,000.
We're getting 2 lots then.
Yeah, that's a good trade.
Is there naming rights for the pickleball courts to the Curl family also? Was that part of the negotiations? I mean, I see that's quoted up there as a Curl pickleball and
That might have
futsal.
been an earlier initiative.
They never showed any interest in the pickleball courts.
Okay.
I think we should probably recognize some with a plaque somewhere in that area of the Curl family's donation. They want recognition with the North Idaho Museum, but I think that it would be appropriate if we had some type of plaque there recognizing that donation.
So do you need a motion, or is that a motion?
No, it's not that's the information. So we would need a motion to
Okay, I would
proceed.
move that we pay the Curl family $50,000 in,
Not the Crow family,
or the
Museum.
North Idaho Museum in memory of the Curl family in payments of over 4 years of $12,500 each year to clear that land up. So that's my motion.
I second that.
Moved and seconded, but this would all be hinged on their donation and acceptance and whatever kind of a letter or documentation then that would clear the land.
Yeah, our legal staff would work through that and work through Danielle to make sure that we had all the
So if it was
proper
free and clear, then
documentation.
from all the heirs.
Yes.
Good job working that out.
I assume the museum's okay with this?
it's very, very honorable of them, so it's kind of nice. Because really, we kind of worried about, they were going to make a killing out of this or, ask for the moon or something, but they didn't.
They actually gave.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
This is great.
That was nice. So
Outcome.
I was wondering if there was any kind of a plaque as part of this, so there isn't, but I guess we'll just think
Yeah,
of
we
something.
could do
I
something.
think so.
Yeah, we'll do something when we
Water fountain's expensive.
get to it.
Something like
Their
would-
maintenance issue.
When I was talking with Robert Singletary, he knows a lot of the history about the Curl family because he's obviously done all
Oh.
of that research. And Thomas Curl was the gentleman's name, and he was quite an interesting person in Coeur d'Alene during that time.
Okay, we've got a motion and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thanks, motion carries. Excellent. That'll free the land up and somebody can build on it.
There you go.
Phil.
That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Item 8, election of chairman and vice chairman.
Mr. Chair, I would like to propose that we nominate Scott Hoskins and Olivia Metz to be the chair and the co-chair for the 2018 year.
I would second that.
I think it'd be good to make Olivia chair. Steve's not here.
You can make that
One
motion.
more, we'll do that next year. You can do one more.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No, you're stuck.
Board,
How about the vice chair?
that was both.
I
Same
mentioned
time.
Nominated for both.
We got both of them, yeah,
You get both of them?
yeah,
Chair and Vice Chair.
yeah.
Commissioner comments? Time for board commissioner comments. Other than, I'll make it come out of, thanks Steve for bird dogging that with the Curl family and coming to a really neat conclusion and stuff of that and helping out another agency that's, that will greatly.
Yeah, Randy Adams did all of the detective work on there, and so he laid the groundwork. I just came in at the very end.
Neat, thanks. Our second option, our time now for public comment. Any other public comment? And item 11 has been scratched, so I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and second. All in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned. That's a wrap.